Hello and welcome to the Female Edge webinar series. I'm Mary Maguire and I'm the author of The Female Edge and the host of this webinar series where we bring inspirational coaches, leaders, people with wisdom to share about how you can live your best life to the series. Today I'm joined by Sharon James, who is herself an inspirational leadership coach and helps people find their most authentic life. And we had a discussion about what we were going to talk about today, and it's very much about be the leader of you. Now, how do you reclaim your power, your intentions, your way of looking at the world? So let me say welcome, Sharon. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm going to say up front now, I have a little bit of a croaky throat, but I think it's the universe sending me a message as I start to share some of my strategies and ideas with people. So I'll tell you more about that as we go on.
Absolutely, because none of us are immune from the need to self-care, and none of us are immune from having lots of things thrown at us in life and that actually causing some imbalance. So yeah, it's a great example of how it might happen. So Sharon, first of all, tell us a bit about you, who you are, what you've done, what you do now, because you've got a really interesting career and you do some great work.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, trying to give a potted history. So I'm originally from Northern Ireland and my background's all the airline industry. And when I joined, that was very simple. What do I want to do? I want to travel. I want to use languages. So that became my career of choice. I'm sure it's a little bit more sophisticated now for people, though that simplicity still stands true. And I really just said yes to everything. And what happened was I started to get invited to take on positions of leadership. I loved anything to do with teams of people. I loved anything to do with being a leader, but through other people, not really a very dictatorial leader. I worked in customer service, I worked in operations, I worked in training and development. And I suppose then I found my niche in leadership and tested myself, went back into the operation as a leader, found out that whether you're leading 400 or 400 people, it's just as difficult. It's that human element, but that became a source of fascination for me. Traveled across the globe and actually got to a point where I really felt like I really wanted to focus on human behavior and leadership development. So I set up my own coaching practice in 2004 and have been running in Shine Out since, coaching leaders in business. And now I very much niche in the space of women leadership and empowerment.
Brilliant. And I think you said something really important there, and we'll actually come back to that. Sorry, I'm aware of my my eyes going different ways. I'm just responding to some of the messages coming through as we're talking. That when you're a leader, the level of complexity is only slightly more depending on the number of people. So if you're leading 4 people or you're leading 400, the same level of skill and insight is very similar. It's just that the scope and the range of it changes, but actually you have to get all of that in place and know how to actually lead people regardless of how small the team is.
Absolutely. It's like the reach is easier when it's 4. It's just finding that different way to get the same stuff out there when you've got like 400 people, and then also allowing the team along with you to support you to be that leader. Because and I think you get further away from, you're measured on a result. But actually it's the input that you put in, because oftentimes you have the least control over that result in terms of being physically able to have a control over it.
Completely, absolutely. And tell me, what are the sort of things you tend to be dealing with in the people that you're coaching these days? What tend to be some of the themes and the issues that you help them with?
Yeah, I suppose balance, and people come to me. We still say time management, don't we? And it's like, we know we're never going to get more time. So for me, it's about energy management and finding. A lot of people would resist the word balance, but I actually quite like the idea of balance, because I think it was Einstein said you have to, to keep a bike balanced, you have to still be in motion.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to help them understand that all of the other areas is supporting them to show up as their best self in
Mm,
that leadership role, because
yeah.
it's very much a role for giving to others and being in services of others.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we're not in service of ourselves.
Oh, completely, completely. I'm surprised people find the idea of balance something that's not palatable to them, but there might be lots of reasons for that. But there was something that struck me there around getting that balance between what you give to your work role and what you give to your own life, and how to get the balance between the two. And I talk to people about it's not pure time management, because organizations are hungry beasts. They will continue to ask for more and for more and for more and for more. And the more you feed them, the more that they'll ask for. Now, obviously, there are times when you need to work hard and you need to deliver things. We all understand that. But we have to understand that the hungry beast needs to be pushed back sometimes and say, yeah, I know this is important to you right now, but long term for me, for my team, for my area of operations, and for my own long-term career, this isn't that important, and I'm going to put it a lower priority because something around my life and my family is taking more of a priority. And it's very hard for us to understand how to put them boundaries in. So I think that was a really good thing. I can understand why people would come to you with that, because we really, really struggle with that.
Yeah. And I remember that moment in my career when I realized I would have to be the one that took control of kind of how I would use or manage the different priorities in my life. No one was going to come in and tell me to go home as the leader, to take time out, to go to the gym, all those kind of stuff. And that's why it became very much about learning how to lead yourself, being such a critical piece of leadership and business as well.
Yeah, completely. And Sarah, who's on with us, she's saying it's so true to have to set boundaries so that the hungry beast doesn't get fat. And I know Sarah does a lot of work herself. She's an amazing coach, and she does a lot of work with individuals, helping them to work through this. And she's also with me writing a book at the moment. We're both in tandem writing a book. So great to see you, Sarah.
Oh, fantastic.
So Sharon, we talked about what would be our niche and our subject for today, and we talked about it being the whole idea about how do you become the leader of you, how do you set the expectations of yourself, how do you do the energy management, which you talked about, how do you learn that that balance for yourself in your life, which we would call self-mastery. So tell us a bit more about how you work with people with that, and what that would start to look like for people.
So I guess for me, the title of the name of my business is the thing in Shine Out. When they come to me, we're going to turn inwards. They have been listening outwards, trying all the strategies. Some are working, some are not. But they're just not feeling themselves. So we're really going to go in and explore how this might work for them. Explore what it is that's getting in the way for them, what's causing this feeling of, oftentimes they come to me, they're feeling disconnected, they're feeling maybe really operating out of autopilot rather than any conscious, intentional way. And also probably lost a little bit of their sparkle, probably veering towards that. Well, maybe not as far as burnout, but certainly in the surviving zone. And if they don't take some action around it, they are going to slip into that burnout zone and really lose all their passion and mojo. And some people have already lost it when they come. But that's the good news. You can get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a bit more about the model that you use to help people to do that.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, I have a slide that just helps people understand. This is a model that I've sort of worked with over the years, and finally what I've managed to do by doing some of my self-coaching is put the self front and center of it. Like everybody else, I wanted to tag it on somewhere around the peripheries or the outside, but I really understood through my own life journey, through my own leadership journey, that the self-centric model was the most holistic model. But you're fighting against some of those stories that you need to release and heal that I have in there, because we are taught from a very early age that don't be selfish. So when you go to do anything around this idea and concept of self, you're working with those kind of stories in your head about it's selfish to want to look after yourself, it's selfish. So I finally managed to get that, and that evolved. I think when it started off, Mary, it probably honestly, it just said self-awareness in there. And then again, as you are working with people to help them create habits and ways of being that's going to move them towards the kind of life and leader that they want to be, you realize awareness alone does not create change. It's essential, and you must be aware, because as Whitmore, I think, said, that which you are not aware of controls you. So we're trying to intentionally make that unconscious conscious. But it evolved into so much more. It evolved into what people call self-care now. I actually believe is self-love. Self-care is acts of self-love. Self-compassion, because life is a very funny habit of doing its thing, and it will be messy, and it will be unfamiliar, and it will be challenging at times. It will be scary at times.
Yeah.
And so that compassion needs to come in as well, and really understanding how to be compassionate with ourselves. So it expanded. And then I understood that you can know all this stuff but not do anything about it. So the mastery piece is just practice, I think, that we are in daily practice towards. There's not a one and done place where we get to and say, got that, mastered that, never revisit it again. We are human. So that's why that is so central. And we loop in and out of this. The other thing that I realized was, and there's no necessarily starting place on this model. For some people, they're really ready to vision, and then they create the vision, and then they start to come up against the blocks. So we go back and look at, well, what is it that's holding you back? What are some of those limiting beliefs or old stories that you're holding on to? I'll give you an example of a lady that I was coaching recently, and she had this wonderful vision of how she would live her life and her business, and it was fabulous, but something kept getting in the way. And long story short, what we realized was she had taken a career break to have her children, and she was living out of a story. And we've all heard this story, if you see a break on your CV, it's not good. And she was living out of that, when in truth, the facts were, it enabled her to really know who she was, really step into what she was about and what she wanted to do. So when she was able to rewrite that story or release the old story and tell the truth is, I'm a much more empowered, knowledgeable, purposeful businesswoman because of that break.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of how you work people through this process and the coaching model, you start with working out what needs to be released and healed before you move on to where do they want to go and what's the vision and what they want to implement.
Yes, so that's where I start, because sometimes we really got to free ourselves up. That's that internal work, because they maybe haven't gone in and thought about, one of my favorite coaching questions is, what do you think? Because they'll tell me, such and such thinks, and society thinks, and men think, and everybody think, but they've never really paid enough much attention to what do I think, what do I really believe. So it's about just helping them access their new updated version of themselves. What are my beliefs? Because some of them will be holding you back, and some of them you think are, you shouldn't have those beliefs, and so you don't operate out of them, and they're actually the very beliefs that you need to step into, put on, and so that you can move forward. And sometimes there's a little bit of healing there in the sense of pattern.
Yeah, and there's just a comment here come through from Sarah saying, change the narrative and change your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you talk a lot about old stories, and you've just mentioned a few of them there, is the things like that lady who had this very strong, view that because she had a break in her career, she wouldn't be seen as credible when she went back into the workplace. But where do these old stories come from? What are the things that actually are getting, because we hear lots of messages. So what are the ones that stick and we hold much more weight to them than the ones that go past us and we don't? Where does this come from?
I think there's definitely the element of societal conditioning, particularly when it comes to women, but also men, this idea that or worth, if you believe your worth is caught up in what you produce, then it's going to be really difficult for you to move into a space of rest and recharge, or recovery and recharge, which is essential to your well-being. So some of it, I think, comes from or societal conditioning. Some of it comes from your upbringing, the culture, whether it be country culture. I mean, you and I have got the Irish connection, whether it be country culture, family culture, kind of some of the stories that you were brought up with that maybe served you back then, but no longer serve you, and need to be released.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the last one, organizational culture, sometimes an organizational culture can create these unspoken stories. I think can sometimes be the most challenging for people, because it's not actually spoken about, but it's an unwritten rule, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's plenty of them, isn't there?
Yeah.
So just before we look at how that might affect, what might be a gender difference in how that shows up, I'd just like to share a little bit about in the vision and implement stage of your model. What are the sort of things that you're working on? What are the sort of things that people are doing?
So first of all, we're getting really clear about what they do want. I always say you don't go into a restaurant and tell the waiter what you don't want. I don't want the pasta, I don't want the bolognese. We have to get really clear on what we do want. So a lot of the time we'll be thinking about that, but I try and connect their left brain and their right brain a little bit through picture vision boarding, all kinds of stories, just ways to access what they truly, truly want. Journaling, I love the power of journaling to help you really envision what a meaningful life looks like for you. So we get really clear, we get really specific, and then we learn how to almost surrender then as well at that stage. You create the vision, and yes, you're in action towards it, because without any action, it is really just a dream. But we also have to surrender in the sense that sometimes it comes to you in a way that you weren't expecting, or it's not meant to be in that particular way. So we have to look at the vision and ask ourselves, how is this showing up for me, maybe in a way I hadn't anticipated.
Yeah. And you can see how again going, I love the name of your company, In Shine Out, and that success is an inside job, which I know you talk about and I talk a lot about in the Female Edge as well. Is, for us to get that outward success, we need to be connected very clearly to the internal sense of who we are and what we want from life. And I think that is such a great example about the vision and implement is you don't go to a restaurant and tell them all the things you don't want, but when we're not centered and clear about things, that's exactly how we go through life. Don't want this,
Yeah.
don't want that, don't like this, don't like that,
Yeah.
don't like that person. And all we're doing is we're sending out mixed messages about what we don't want.
Yeah.
And we think
Yeah.
about it from an energetic perspective, but all we're magnifying and bringing back to us is all the things we don't want, because we haven't
Yeah.
done what we do want.
Exactly. And there can be, in the beginning, with some people, I say, well, that's good. At least you know what you don't want. How do we shift then into, so what is your opposite of that? Because it's not necessarily the opposite of it. What's your opposite of that? What are you looking for instead? And very much tapping into feelings. You know, if your vision doesn't make your life vision doesn't make your heart thump and pump, I doubt that you put an awful lot of effort and energy into it and to make it come true.
Yeah, I mean, I do something similar in terms of a vision and roadmap with my my clients, and you may experience this as well. I find that once we move out all of the clutter of what they don't want to really articulate what they do want, there can be quite a fear factor of that for people, because it's like suddenly I have to take responsibility for being intentional about my life and setting goals for myself. And, you know, that feels very big. That feels like there's a lot on my shoulders when I've been used to pushing it out. And also it's a bit scary in case I come up with things either that are really, really big, or if I might fail, you know, if I've put something out there and failed. Do you find that sometimes comes out as well?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. At some stage, you'll address those, you know, fatal fears of failure, rejection, imperfection, and not being good enough. Somewhere along the way, they'll show up in the journey. That's why sometimes in my model, I have to look back into this releasing and healing, because as you say, as they get really clear about what they do want, it will, you know, it will bring up fears, but they're good fears in the sense that, but we still have to deal with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah's just saying here, fear of change is probably one of the biggest blockers to growth. Yeah. And obviously as coaches, we experience that all the time.
Yeah, and I mean, you will experience resistance, because if you've been doing, that's just the human nature and biology of change. When we start to do something different, the brain has kind of got used to it, even though it may not have been necessarily giving us the results that we want. It's familiar. And so once you start doing something that's unfamiliar, that triggers that part of the brain that thinks you might be unsafe or whatever. So expect to experience resistance. Don't take it as a sign that you haven't got the right vision, you haven't got what it takes, whatever. It's just a sign of being human.
Yeah, completely. Absolutely. And I was going to ask you, do you see this affecting, you know, that lack of confidence and that concern about stating what they want and making a big vision? Do you see there's a difference between how men and women respond to that? Do you feel that women struggle with it more than men, or less than men?
I definitely do. I think women love the creative act of visioning and stuff like that, because it really taps into those feminine qualities. And I'm not talking about male, female here, just that feminine quality of creativity and flow and intuition. And but in terms of, you know, really putting yourself out there, then that's when women, I think that the imposter syndrome starts to creep in a little bit more, or what I like to refer to, and I'm sure others do, the inner mean girl. Even though she may not be a girl, it might be, you know, a guy or something, but they start to kind of take hold of us a little bit more, because definitely what I notice with women, we find it difficult to receive, even receive compliments. You know, how often does somebody compliment you and you, oh, this old thing? There's something in our makeup, let's say, that possibly some of the stories that we're told by the society that, you know, you want to, don't get too big for your boots, don't be this, don't be that type thing. And so that shows up a little bit.
I think that there was a thing that we've talked about before about and definitely there's a socialization aspect to this, which I often talk about how we socialize the gender roles very strongly from very, very early, and the messages we give to girls are very, very different to the messages we give to boys, and therefore the behavioral outcomes. But one of the ones you talked about, which really struck me, was that thing of not being able to receive but still being constantly in giving mode, to the point where the burnout and the stressed out is coming from the fact that there's this mode and this almost internal dialogue of I must keep giving, even when the tank's completely empty.
Yeah. I mean, that, I would say that's definitely one of those, where we've been conditioned to believe that our worth is defined by how much we are giving to others, and that to take for ourselves or to receive is that bad, selfish. And I think that's really detrimental. And when I talk about the new role of feminine leadership, I think we have a right and a responsibility to move into this space where we do prioritize ourselves, because we do understand that when we do that, we have much more to give. We have better relationships, better communication, and make better choices and feel better. And I think we operate more out of responding rather than reacting, because when you're in that exhausted state, physically, mentally, emotionally, because the internal chatter exhausts you as well.
Completely, because that'll keep you going regardless of how exhausted you are. It'll still be telling you need to do more, you haven't done enough.
Oh,
yeah. So that will never be the place where you find the balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's busy telling you, well, everybody else seems to have it all together, so you keep your superwoman cape on so that nobody knows. It makes it look like you're in control type thing. But no, I think I do believe we have a right and a responsibility for ourselves and for future generations of young women leaders to really know that is in service of society, and service of your family, and service of the business by you doing that. Definitely. I would be quite passionate about that.
Yeah. So tell us one thing that might be a good takeaway for people who are listening to this either live or in the playback. If they want to do more to feel more in control of themselves, to be the leader of themselves, to have more self-mastery, what is one thing that they could do that would be useful for them?
I think they're checking in with themselves throughout the day. You and I both have a passion and an interest for mindfulness, and for a long time didn't really understand what that meant, but I have what I call my mindful moments. Because if you want to change, but you don't really know what your thoughts or your emotions or your feelings are, because you're so much just in the do mode, a mindful check-in with yourself throughout the day where you just stop, take a breath, look around you. Where am I? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what do I need right now? And just that moment is enough. Done regularly enough, you'll start to see the patterns emerging. And just recently for me, every time I asked myself when I stopped and did this, so the other thing that people think about life coaches, that we are this perfect version. Let me bust that myth right here and now.
Completely.
The reason my voice is going is one of the signals for me that I've been giving a lot. And so I need to pull back in. So awareness of your signals as well. What are your signals that you need to get into that space? But back to that mindfulness, just in that moment, take yourself out of your head, put your hand in your heart, take a breath, and just ask yourself, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I need?
Brilliant. Yeah. And it's so easy. We can all do that. you know, just at a moment when we're feeling overwhelmed or we can see our mind going into overdrive, it's okay, what's going on?
Yeah.
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 And the power of that breath
Mm.
is just, you know, because it's the thing that we do without even thinking, and yet it keeps us alive. But when you consciously and intentionally
Mm.
engage with your breath, it's such an internal source of power.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. So just in terms of, you know, anyone who's listening live or in the playback, we'd love to keep the conversation going with you.
Yeah.
So here's how you can keep in touch with us. Sharon, as you've heard, does some amazing work from Inside Out, and you can find her in a website which is very appropriately called inshineout.com, which I absolutely love. And her email is sharon@inshineout.com. And also on LinkedIn, if people want to connect with you, they can find you as Sharon James. And obviously you'll be a UK version of Sharon James if people are looking for you. And you know me, you can find my book, The Female Edge, on Amazon. You can find me at agents2change, number2change.com, and my email there. And also you can find me on LinkedIn, Mary Maguire. Again, it'll be a UK version because there's a few musicians called Mary Maguire in the US. I'm not one of them. I can't hold them. Anyone who knows me will tell you. So that's great. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this.
Yeah.
Hope you found some of the tips and the ideas useful. And keep in touch if we can help in any way. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for your time and attention.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day. Thanks very much.
Bye.